Flashing lights blinded me, a rifle barrel aimed at my chest. My hands were in the air while commuters filmed me like guilty entertainment. Then the officer said the words that made my blood run cold. "Your sister reported this car stolen." I realized she did not just want my inheritance. She wanted me labeled dangerous on paper before the judge ever heard my voice. My name is Chloe Robinson. I am 34 years old. And until this morning, the only thing I was guilty of was over-preparing for a probate hearing that had already consumed 6 months of my life. The interstate was gray and slick with morning dew. The sun was just beginning to burn through the fog, casting a pale, sickly light over the hood of my sedan. I kept my hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel, my eyes flicking between the road ahead and the digital clock on the dashboard. It was 7:20 in the morning. The hearing was scheduled for 9 o'clock sharp. I had allowed myself an hour and 40 minutes for a drive that typically took 45 minutes. I was not just a punctual person. I was a compliance officer by trade. I lived my life in the margins of safety, calculating risks and mitigating them before they could manifest into problems. I checked the rear-view mirror to ensure the lane was clear for a merge. That was when the world fractured. Behind me, the gray morning was violently displaced by a strobe of blue and red. The lights were so bright they seemed to physically push against my rear bumper. My stomach dropped, a sensation like missing a step on a tall staircase. I glanced at my speedometer. I was doing exactly 55 miles per hour. My registration was current. My brake lights were functional. I had checked them yesterday. I activated my turn signal and began to pull over to the shoulder, assuming the cruiser needed to pass me to catch a speeder further up the line, but the cruiser did not pass. It swerved aggressively behind me, mirroring my movements. As soon as my tires crunched onto the gravel of the shoulder, a second cruiser screamed down the on-ramp ahead, cutting across 2 lanes of traffic to box me in from the front. This was not a traffic stop. I put the car in park, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I reached for my seatbelt, intending to unbuckle it and retrieve my license, but a voice magnified by a loudspeaker shattered the air. "Driver, remain in the vehicle. Do not move." The command was guttural, distorted by the PA system, but the threat was crystal clear. I froze. My hands hovered over the steering wheel. Through the windshield, I saw the officer in the front cruiser exit his vehicle. He did not walk toward me with a ticket book. He crouched behind his open door, leveling a service weapon directly at my face. I looked to the rearview mirror. The officer behind me had done the same. I was bracketed. Panic is a cold thing. It does not feel like fire. It feels like ice water flooding your veins, numbing your extremities while your brain screams. I took a breath, forcing the air down into my lungs. Compliance. I told myself, survive the procedure. "Driver, roll down your window. Put your keys on the roof of the car." My fingers trembled as I pressed the button for the window. The glass slid down, letting in the roar of rush-hour traffic. I turned the ignition off. I pulled the key fob from the slot. Slowly, deliberately. I reached my left hand out to the window and placed the keys on the cold metal roof. Clack. "Open the door from the outside. Step out. Keep your hands visible." I opened the door using the exterior handle. My movements jagged. I stepped out onto the asphalt. The wind whipped my blazer around my waist. I was wearing my court suit, a navy blue ensemble chosen to project competence and stability to the probate judge. Now, it just made me look like a white-collar criminal caught in the act. Walk backward toward the sound of my voice. Do not turn around. I took a step back, then another. My heels scraped against the grit of the road. To my left, the morning commute had slowed to a crawl. I could see them, the faces pressed against the glass of passing cars. Worse, I saw the phones. Passengers were holding their devices up, recording the woman in the business suit walking backward at gunpoint. I could almost see the captions they would write. Drug bust, fugitive, psycho. It did not matter if I was innocent. In the digital age, the image was the verdict. If this video made it to the internet before I made it to the courtroom, my reputation would be dead before the gavel fell. "Stop! Get on your knees! Hands behind your head!" I sank to the hard pavement. The gravel dug into my knees through my slacks. I interlaced my fingers behind my head, staring at the bumper of my own car. A heavy hand grabbed my wrist. Cold steel clicked around one wrist, then the other. The handcuffs were tight, pinching the delicate skin over the bone. "Chloe Robinson," the officer said. He was close now, his breathing heavy, adrenaline spiking his voice. "You are being detained." "Why?" My voice was small, barely audible over the traffic. "This is my car. I have the title in the glove box. We have a report on this vehicle," the officer said. Hauling me to my feet, he marched me toward the back of his cruiser. "Reported stolen this morning. Suspect considered armed and dangerous." I stopped. I physically planted my feet, forcing him to tug on my arm. "Stolen?" I repeated. The word tasted like ash. "That is impossible. I bought this car 3 years ago. It is paid off." "Tell it to the judge," he muttered, pushing me toward the back seat. But as he guided my head down to avoid the doorframe, the pieces slammed together in my mind: the timing, the aggression of the stop, the specific detail of being armed. Today was the probate hearing for my grandfather, Everett Robinson. I was the designated personal representative in his will. If I missed this hearing, the judge could appoint an emergency administrator, and there was only one person who wanted that role bad enough to risk a felony: Vanessa, my sister. Vanessa Robinson had spent the last 5 years circling our grandfather's estate like a vulture waiting for a wounded animal to stop breathing. She had tried to borrow against her inheritance while he was still alive. She had tried to charm him into rewriting the will when his dementia began to set in, and when all of that failed, she had turned her sights on me. I sat in the back of the cruiser, the hard plastic seat digging into my spine. The cage separated me from the officers in the front. I took a deep breath, pushing down the urge to scream, and engaged the part of my brain that handled crisis management for a living. "Officer," I said. My voice was steadier now. It was the voice I used when explaining a regulatory violation to a board of directors. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am the legal owner of that vehicle. My registration is in the glove box. My insurance is on my phone, which is in my purse." The officer in the driver's seat glanced at me in the rearview mirror. He was younger than the one who had cuffed me, and he looked slightly less pumped, full of adrenaline. "We will verify everything once we get you to the station." "No," I said. "We do not have time for the station. I have a court hearing at 9 o'clock. If I am not there, I lose my grandfather's estate. That is exactly what the person who called this in wants." The older officer, the sergeant, turned in his seat to look at me through the mesh. "Lady, you are driving a hot car with a warning marker on it. You are not going to court." "Check the reporter," I said. I leaned forward as far as the handcuffs would allow. "You have a dispatch log. It tells you who called in the report and at what time. Check it, right now." "We do not release caller information," the sergeant said dismissively. "I am not asking for the name," I lied. Or rather, I framed it as a procedural request. "I am asking you to verify the time of the call relative to my location. I left my house at 6:45 in the morning. If that report was called in 5 minutes after I left, by a family member, then you are being used as a weapon in a civil dispute. And since you pulled a gun on an unarmed woman based on a false report, I suggest you verify the source before you book me." The sergeant stared at me. He saw the suit. He saw the calm desperation in my eyes. He saw that I was not acting like a thief caught in a joyride. I was acting like a woman who was being hunted. He picked up his radio mic. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4 Alpha. Can you give me the timestamp on that stolen vehicle report and verify the relationship of the reporting party if listed?" Static crackled through the car. I held my breath. The seconds stretched out, long and agonizing. Outside, the traffic continued to flow. Hundreds of people going about their Tuesday morning, oblivious to the fact that my life was dangling by a thread. The dispatcher's voice came back, tinny but audible. "Copy, 4 Alpha. Report was filed at 6:52 in the morning. Reporting party is a Vanessa Robinson. identified as the sister of the registered owner, stated the owner took the vehicle without permission and was in possession of a firearm. 6:52. I closed my eyes. I had backed out of my driveway at 6:46. Vanessa must have been watching from her window, phone in hand, waiting for my taillights to disappear around the corner before she dialed 911. She knew my route. She knew I took the interstate. She knew that a stolen vehicle report might get me pulled over, but an armed and dangerous advisory would get me felony stopped at gunpoint. She did not just want me late. She wanted me traumatized. She wanted me in a cell. She wanted to walk into that courtroom at 9 o'clock, look at the empty table where I was supposed to sit, and tell the judge with a sad, mournful shake of her head that her sister was unstable, criminal, and unfit to manage $1, let alone an estate worth millions. "Officer," I said, opening my eyes, "my name is Chloe Robinson. Vanessa Robinson is my sister. She is contesting the will in probate court today. She filed that report 6 minutes after I left my house to ensure I would be arrested on my way to the hearing. I do not have a gun. You can search the car. You can search me. But you need to understand that you are currently an accessory to a malicious false report." The sergeant looked at the radio, then back at me. The tension in the car shifted. It was no longer the hunter and the prey. It was 3 people realizing they were all pawns in someone else's game. 6:52, the sergeant muttered to himself. He looked at his partner. "Who reports a car stolen 6 minutes after it leaves the driveway, unless they are watching the clock?" "Check the registration," I pressed. "Please, run the VIN. It will come back to me. Chloe Robinson, not Vanessa. She cannot report a car stolen if she does not own it." The younger officer began typing furiously on his laptop. After a moment, he looked up, his expression unreadable. "Vehicle is registered to Chloe Robinson. No lien holder. Clean title." "And the armed advisory?" the sergeant asked. "No pistol permit on file for the subject." The younger officer said, "No prior criminal history, not even a speeding ticket." The sergeant exhaled a long, slow breath. He rubbed the back of his neck. He knew. I could see it in his eyes. He knew he had just pulled a gun on a tax-paying citizen because a vindictive sibling decided to swat her own sister. "Uncuff her," the sergeant said. "Sarge?" "I said uncuff her," he snapped. "And get on the radio. Tell dispatch we need to verify the credibility of the caller. This smells wrong." The younger officer opened the back door. As the metal cuffs clicked open and released my wrists, I did not rub them. I did not cry. I looked at the red marks on my skin and thought about Vanessa. She thought this was a game. She thought she could use the police force as her personal chessboard. She thought that by the time I explained myself, the gavel would have already banged down in her favor. She was wrong. I checked my watch. It was 7:35. "Officer," I said, stepping out of the cruiser and smoothing the wrinkles in my blazer, "I am going to need an incident number, and I'm going to need you to write down exactly what time that call came in. Because when I walk into that courtroom, I am not just going to defend myself." I looked toward the horizon, where the courthouse waited miles away. "I am going to bring the evidence of what she just did." The sergeant looked at me. He was no longer looking at a suspect. He was looking at a woman who had just been handed a loaded weapon in the form of a police report. "You realize," the sergeant said quietly, "that if she lied about the gun, that is a felony?" "I know," I said. My voice was cold, colder than the morning air. "And she is going to learn that, too." I walked back to my car, my legs shaking only slightly. I had survived the ambush. Now, it was time for the counterattack. The adrenaline that had spiked during the initial confrontation began to curdle into a cold, focused clarity. My wrists still throbbed phantom aches where the metal cuffs had pinched the skin. But my mind had already shifted gears from survival to documentation. I was no longer a driver on the side of the road. I was a compliance officer conducting an audit of a catastrophic failure. The sergeant, whose name tag read A. Miller, holstered his weapon but kept his hand resting near his belt. The shift in the atmosphere was palpable. Moments ago, I was a threat to public safety, a target to be neutralized. Now, as the reality of the timestamp settled in, I was becoming something far more complicated for them, a liability. "Ma'am, if you have the registration, I need to see it now," the younger officer said. His voice had lost its aggressive edge, replaced by a cautious, almost apologetic tone. He was young enough to look rattled by the fact that he had almost pulled the trigger on a woman in a tailored suit. I nodded slowly. I made a point of narrating my movements, a habit learned from years of de-escalation training in corporate environments, though I never thought I would apply it to a roadside felony stop. "I am going to reach into the glove compartment," I said, my voice steady despite the tremors in my knees. "The registration is in a plastic sleeve. My insurance is on my phone." I leaned into the passenger side of my sedan. The interior smelled of the vanilla air freshener I had bought last week, a mundane scent that felt jarringly out of place in a crime scene. I retrieved the document. It was crisp, white, and undeniable. I handed it to the younger officer. "And the insurance," I added, pulling my phone from my purse. My fingers felt thick and clumsy as I unlocked the screen. The app took 3 agonizing seconds to load. In the digital age, your innocence often buffers. I held up the screen, displaying the active policy number and the effective dates. "Chloe Robinson," the officer read aloud, comparing the screen to the paper registration and then to my driver's license. "Address matches, VIN matches." He walked to the front of the car, leaning down to check the vehicle identification number plate on the dashboard against the paperwork. He ran his finger along the sequence, murmuring the numbers into his radio. The dispatch confirmation came back a moment later, loud enough for me to hear over the rushing traffic. "Vehicle is registered to the subject. Title is clear. No active warrants associated with the owner." The younger officer stood up and looked at Sergeant Miller. "It is her car, Sarge. Bought and paid for 3 years ago. No theft report until this morning." Miller dragged a hand down his face. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. He saw the expensive fabric of my blazer, the organized briefcase in the passenger seat, the sheer bewildered exhaustion in my eyes. The narrative Vanessa had spun, that I was an erratic, armed car thief, was dissolving under the weight of basic bureaucracy. "Ms. Robinson," Miller said, stepping closer. "We still have the issue of the firearm advisory. The caller was very specific. She stated you waved a pistol before driving off, for everyone's safety. I would like to do a quick search of the vehicle, just to clear the air." It was a trap, not a malicious one on his part, perhaps, but a procedural one. If I let them search, I would be admitting that there was a valid reason to suspect me. I would be validating Vanessa's lie. Furthermore, a search would take 20 minutes. I had less than an hour to get to the courthouse. "No," I said. Miller blinked. "Excuse me?" "I do not consent to a search," I said. I kept my back straight, channeling every ounce of authority I possessed. "I have provided my license, my registration, and my insurance. You have verified my identity and the ownership of the vehicle. You have verified that the theft report was filed moments after I left my house by a family member involved in a legal dispute. There is no probable cause to believe a crime has been committed by me. There is, however, significant evidence that a crime has been committed against me." Miller stared at me. He was not used to suspects quoting the Fourth Amendment with the cadence of a boardroom presentation. "If you search this car," I continued, "you are validating a harassment campaign. I am late for a probate hearing where the person who called in this false report is currently trying to seize control of my family's estate. I am not going to let her delay me by another second." The sergeant held my gaze for a long, tense moment. He was weighing the risks. If he let me go and I did have a gun, he was finished. If he detained me further for an illegal search based on a debunked phone call, he was sued. "She said you were armed," Miller repeated, but the conviction was gone. "She also said I stole my own car," I countered. "She lied about the theft to get the police involved. She lied about the gun to get the guns involved. It is called swatting. Sergeant, and in this state, Filing a false report with an armed advisory is a felony. Miller looked at the younger officer. Cancel the tow truck. Clear the scene. He turned back to me, his expression grim. You are right. If she added the weapon advisory just to spice up the report, she is looking at jail time. But that is a battle for later. Right now, you are free to go. Not yet, I said. I was not leaving without armor. Vanessa had weaponized the police system against me. I needed the system to provide the shield. I need an incident number, I stated. And I need you to add a specific note to the dispatch log. I wanted on the record that the vehicle was verified as belonging to me, and that the report appears to be civil in nature and potentially false. Miller sighed. Pulling a card from his vest pocket, he scribbled a string of numbers on it. I cannot put false in the official log until we investigate, Ms. Robinson, but I will note that ownership was verified and the subject was released with no charges. That will show the judge that we stopped you and found nothing. He handed me the card. It was a flimsy piece of cardstock, but to me, it felt heavier than a gold bar. It was proof. One more thing, Miller said, his eyes scanning the horizon where the sun was now fully up, casting harsh shadows on the highway. If your sister is willing to call in an armed felony stop just to make you late for court, she is not done. This was just the opening move. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. What do you mean? I mean, people who do this do not usually have a plan B, he said. They have a plan B, C, and D. If she knows you are not in cuffs, she might try something else before you get to those courthouse steps. Another call, a different jurisdiction. Maybe she tells the court security you are coming in hot. I had not thought of that. Vanessa was desperate. Desperation made people creative in the worst possible ways. I have to get to that hearing, I said. If I am not there when the docket is called, she wins by default. Miller nodded. He made a quick decision. The kind that separated career officers from rookies. We are going to escort you. Excuse me? We are heading that way to file the paperwork anyway. He lied smoothly. You drive your car. We will follow you. If anyone else calls in a 911 on a silver sedan, we will be right there to cancel it before it goes over the radio. And when you get to the courthouse, I will have Officer Hayes walk you to the metal detectors, just to make sure you do not get tripped up by any misunderstandings at security. I could have cried. The relief was so sharp it was physically painful. Thank you, I whispered. Do not thank me yet, Miller said, walking back to his cruiser. Go win your case, then come find us. We need to have a serious conversation about your sister. I got back into my car. My hands were still shaking as I put the key in the ignition. But the engine roared to life, a familiar, comforting sound. I merged back onto the highway, the two cruisers falling in behind me. I was no longer a fugitive running from the law. I was the head of a motorcade. As I settled into the rhythm of the drive, the adrenaline began to recede, leaving room for the anger to ignite. Vanessa had almost gotten me killed. If I had reached for my phone too quickly, if I had stepped out of the car too aggressively, I could be bleeding out on the asphalt right now. She had gambled with my life for a share of a hotel chain. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I glanced down. It was a text message. The name on the screen made my jaw clench. Vanessa. I knew I should not look. I knew I should focus on the road. But the strategist in me, the woman who had just stared down a gun barrel, knew that information was power. I waited until the road was straight, then tapped the screen to open the preview. Where are you? The message was in all caps. It was not a question. It was a demand. She was sitting in that courtroom, watching the clock, waiting for the news that I had been arrested. She was probably refreshing the county booking logs on her tablet, confused as to why my mugshot had not appeared yet. I did not reply. Silence was a weapon, too. Let her sweat. Let her wonder if her plan had worked, or if I was simply lying in a ditch somewhere. 5 minutes passed. The courthouse skyline came into view, the dome glinting in the sunlight. My phone buzzed again. If you show up, it'll get worse. I let out a short, sharp breath. There it was. The mask had slipped. Most people would have deleted the message in a fit of rage, or perhaps called her screaming. I did neither. I picked up the phone, held it steady, and pressed the side buttons to take a screenshot. The screen flashed white, capturing the threat, the timestamp, and the sender's name in one irrefutable image. Saved to photos. She had made a critical error. She assumed that fear would make me retreat. She assumed that a threat would make me turn the car around. She did not understand that she had just handed me the second piece of the puzzle. The first was the police incident card in my pocket. The second was this text. She was not just trying to steal an inheritance. She was engaging in witness intimidation. I looked in the rearview mirror. The police cruisers were still there, silent guardians ensuring I reached my destination. I was not alone. I was not helpless. And I was not late. I merged onto the exit ramp, the tires humming against the pavement. I could almost feel Vanessa's presence ahead, sitting in that sterile courtroom, smoothing her skirt, checking her watch, rehearsing the lies she was about to tell the judge. She thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She thought she had swept the pieces off the board. She did not know I was bringing the board with me. I pulled into the courthouse parking garage, the police cruisers peeling off at the entrance to block traffic for me momentarily, a professional courtesy that felt like divine intervention. I parked the car, grabbed my briefcase, and checked my reflection in the visor mirror. My hair was slightly mussed from the wind on the highway. My eyes were wide, the pupils dilated from stress. I looked like someone who had been through hell. Good. I thought, let the judge see it. I smoothed my blazer, grabbed the incident card, and checked the screenshot one last time. I walked toward the elevator, my heels clicking a rhythm of impending war on the concrete floor. Officer Hayes was waiting for me by the entrance, just as Sergeant Miller had promised. "Ready, ma'am?" he asked. "Yes," I said, and for the first time that morning, I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a creditor coming to collect a debt that was long overdue. "I am ready." The elevator doors opened, and we stepped in. The numbers climbed. 1, 2, 3, taking me closer to the courtroom, closer to Vanessa. She had wanted a fight. She had wanted drama. She had wanted to destroy me with paper and procedure. She was about to learn that I wrote the manual on procedure as the doors pinged open on the 4th floor. I tightened my grip on my briefcase. Inside were the documents that proved my ownership of the car. In my pocket was the card that proved her crime. On my phone was the threat that proved her malice. I walked down the hallway, the officer flanking me, and I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The panic was gone. The fear was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard certainty of what I had to do. I was not just going to defend myself, I was going to dismantle her. The courthouse hallway smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. It was a scent I knew well from my career in corporate compliance, where the air in waiting rooms always felt thin, as if the oxygen had been siphoned off by the lawyers billing by the hour. I adjusted the strap of my bag on my shoulder, feeling the physical weight of my defense. In my arms, I carried a 3-inch binder. It was not just a collection of papers, it was a fortress. Inside, color-coded with obsessive precision, was the entire history of my grandfather's estate. The blue tabs marked the will and testament. The green tabs organized the asset valuation. The red tabs, which were the most numerous, chronicled the medical timeline of his final years, proof that he was of sound mind when he named me executor. I had spent weeks building this binder, ensuring that every page was notarized, every signature verified, and every timeline unassailable. I squeezed it against my chest, grounding myself in the solidity of facts. I turned the corner toward courtroom 4B, my heels clicking a sharp, rhythmic warning on the terrazzo floor. And there she was. Vanessa stood near the double oak doors, framed by a sunbeam filtering through the high windows. She looked nothing like the woman who would call in a false felony report on her own sister. She looked immaculate. She was wearing a coat the color of heavy cream, draped over a dress of soft, pale blue. Her hair was pulled back in a loose, elegant chignon, and her makeup was done with a masterful touch that suggested grief rather than vanity. She looked like the perfect, concerned granddaughter, waiting to bravely shoulder the burden of a family tragedy. She was laughing softly at something her lawyer said. Her head was tipped back slightly, exposing the long, graceful line of her neck. Then she saw me. The reaction was microscopic, a glitch in the performance that only a sibling would catch. Her smile did not drop, but it froze. The corners of her mouth tightened, and her eyes, which had been bright with feigned charm, went instantly flat. It was a look of pure calculation. She looked at my wrists, checking for handcuffs. When she saw my bare skin and the watch on my left arm, her gaze snapped up to my face. She had expected an empty hallway. She had expected a frantic phone call from a holding cell. She had expected to walk into that courtroom alone, the sole survivor of a family disaster she had engineered. Instead, she was looking at me. I did not stop walking. I did not let my stride falter. I approached them, my face a mask of professional indifference. I had learned long ago that in a negotiation, the person who speaks first usually loses. Vanessa stepped away from her lawyer, a tall man with silver hair and a suit that cost more than my first car. She moved into my path, forcing me to slow down. She reached out a hand, not to touch me, but to invade my personal space, bringing with her a cloud of floral perfume that was sickeningly sweet. "Chloe," she said. Her voice was breathless, pitched perfectly for any bystanders to hear. "Oh, thank God. I was so worried. I heard there was an accident on the highway. You look terrible." She was scanning my face, looking for the cracks. She wanted to see the tears, the shaking hands, the trauma of having a gun pointed at my head. She wanted the satisfaction of knowing she had broken me. I looked her dead in the eye. "I am sure you were worried, Vanessa. The police were very thorough." Her eyes narrowed slightly. She leaned in closer, dropping the facade of the concerned sister for just a second. She lowered her voice to a whisper, a sound so quiet it barely disturbed the air between us. "I did not need you arrested," she hissed, her lips barely moving. "I just needed you late." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. But I did not flinch. It was a confession, plain and simple. She did not care about the criminal charges. She did not care about the risk. She only cared about the clock. In probate court, time was the only currency that mattered. If the personal representative was not present when the docket was called, the judge could strip them of their title in a heartbeat. I stepped back, re-establishing the boundary. "You underestimated the traffic," I said, my voice flat. "And you underestimated me." Vanessa pulled back, her mask slipping back into place as if it had never moved. She smiled, a sad, pitying expression that made my stomach turn. "We will see," she said. That was when I noticed what she was holding, unlike my massive, comprehensive binder. Vanessa was clutching a single, thin folder. It was black, sleek, and terrifyingly slender. In the world of compliance and law, volume usually meant defense. You drowned the opposition in data. But a thin folder meant offense. It meant a specific, targeted weapon. It meant a single piece of paper designed to cut through all the noise and sever the artery of the case. I stared at that black folder. My mind raced. What did she have? A forged codicil? A letter from a doctor claiming incapacity? "Shall we?" Vanessa asked, gesturing toward the heavy wooden doors. Her lawyer, who had been watching our exchange with the bored detachment of a mercenary, opened the door for her. She glided through, her heels making no sound on the carpeted aisle. I took a deep breath, adjusted my grip on my binder, and followed her into the arena. The courtroom was a different world. The hallway had been full of echoes and movement, but inside, the air was still and heavy. It smelled of old paper, mahogany, and judgment. The ceiling was high, pressing down on everyone below. The gallery was mostly empty, save for a few other petitioners waiting for their turn to divide the spoils of their own family tragedies. This was not a place for shouting matches. This was a place for silent warfare. It was a place where you did not stab someone with a knife. You stabbed them with a precedent. I walked to the table on the left side of the aisle. Vanessa and her lawyer took the table on the right. The physical separation felt vast, a chasm bridged only by the shared bloodline we were both trying to monetize or protect. I set my binder down on the table. The thud was satisfyingly heavy. I opened it to the first tab, laying out my pen and my notepad. I did not have a lawyer. I had considered hiring one, but the fees would have eaten into the estate before we even began. And frankly, I knew the compliance codes better than most general practitioners. I had the number for the legal counsel at Crown Vanta Compliance Group, my employer, on speed dial if things went purely procedural, but for the facts of the estate. I trusted no one but myself, Vanessa's lawyer, whom I recognized from his website as Marcus Sterling, a man known for aggressive estate litigation, was arranging his own papers. He moved with a slow, deliberate confidence. He did not look at me. To him, I was not an opponent. I was a speed bump. I looked at Vanessa. She was sitting with her back straight, her hands folded demurely in her lap. She was staring at the empty judge's bench, her expression one of pious anticipation. She looked like a saint. I looked down at my own hands. There was a smudge of grease on my thumb, a remnant from when I had been forced to kneel on the highway. I rubbed it away aggressively. I would not let her see the dirt. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed, his voice startling me despite the anticipation. The door behind the bench opened, and Judge Vance swept into the room. He was an older man with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite and then eroded by 50 years of listening to people lie about money. He sat down, the black robe settling around him like a storm cloud. He adjusted his glasses and looked down at the docket. "Matter number 412, the clerk announced. Estate of Everett Robinson." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. "Appearances," Judge Vance said, not looking up from the file in front of him. I stood up. My legs felt steady, anchored by the adrenaline. "Chloe Robinson," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. "Granddaughter of the deceased, and the proposed personal representative named in the will." I sat down. "Mr. Sterling stood up. He did not button his jacket. He leaned forward slightly, resting his knuckles on the table, a posture of dominance. "Marcus Sterling, representing Vanessa Robinson, granddaughter of the deceased, and an interested party in the estate." Judge Vance looked over his spectacles. "We are here for the admission of the will and the appointment of the executor. I see the paperwork is in order from Ms. Chloe Robinson. Are there any objections to the appointment?" This was the moment. The standard procedure was for Sterling to file a formal contest, which would push the hearing to a trial date months from now. That was the delay game. But Vanessa had said she needed me late today. That meant the play was immediate. "Your Honor," Sterling said, his voice smooth and rich, like expensive bourbon. "We do not just have an objection. We have a preliminary emergency matter that must be addressed before the court can even consider Ms. Robinson for the role of fiduciary." I felt the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. Judge Vance frowned. "An emergency matter? I do not see a motion on the docket. It was filed electronically at 8 o'clock this morning." "Your Honor," Sterling said. He picked up the thin black folder that Vanessa had been holding. He held it up, not like a document, but like a weapon. "We are moving for the immediate disqualification of Chloe Robinson based on conduct prejudicial to the estate and personal instability." I froze. Personal instability? "The clerk is processing the file now," Sterling continued. "But I have a courtesy copy for the court and for the opposing party." He walked over to the bench and handed a document to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Then he walked over to my table. He did not look me in the eye. He simply slid a single stapled packet across the mahogany surface. I looked down at the paper. Emergency petition to suspend powers and appoint special administrator. My eyes scanned the first paragraph, and I felt the blood drain from my face. It was not a legal argument about the will. It was a character assassination. "Your Honor," Sterling said, walking back to his podium, "we argue that Ms. Chloe Robinson is unfit to manage the assets of this estate. We have received information concerning an incident that occurred this very morning involving the police, a stolen vehicle, and a potential firearms violation. Furthermore, we have concerns regarding her mental state and her history of volatile behavior toward my client. Vanessa shifted in her seat. She did not look at me. She brought a tissue to her eye, dabbing away a tear that did not exist. "The estate requires a steady hand," Sterling said, his voice filled with grave concern. "Not someone who is currently the subject of a police investigation." I sat there, my hand resting on my thick, color-coded binder. I realized then what the thin folder was. It was the trap. The police stop had not just been to make me late. It had been to create the record they were now using to disqualify me. They had manufactured a crime, reported it, and were now citing the report as proof of my instability. It was a perfect circle of lies. Judge Vance began reading the document. I watched his eyes move back and forth. I waited for him to look up. I waited for him to ask me if it was true. "Ms. Robinson," the judge said, his voice unreadable. "Counsel is alleging that you were detained by law enforcement this morning. Is this true?" I stood up slowly. I picked up the single piece of paper I had placed on top of my binder, the incident card Sergeant Miller had given me. "Your Honor," I said, "I was detained, but not because I'm a criminal." I looked at Vanessa. She was finally looking at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. She was waiting for me to scream. She was waiting for me to deny it emotionally. She was waiting for the explosion. "I was detained," I repeated, my voice ice cold, "because the petitioner, Vanessa Robinson, filed a false police report to prevent me from entering this courtroom." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a chess piece being moved into a position that no one had seen coming. "And," I added, lifting the incident card, "I have the receipts." The courtroom air was so still that the hum of the ventilation system sounded like a roaring engine. Marcus Sterling remained standing, his posture rigid with the kind of manufactured outrage that costs $600 an hour. He did not look at me. He kept his eyes fixed on Judge Vance, treating the bench as the only audience that mattered. "Your Honor," Sterling said, his voice dropping an octave to convey grave concern, "we are not merely talking about a family squabble. We are talking about a police intervention that occurred less than 2 hours ago. The police do not detain citizens on the side of the highway without cause. The petitioner, Ms. Vanessa Robinson, received information that the proposed personal representative was driving erratically and was potentially armed for the safety of the estate's assets, and frankly, for the safety of everyone in this building. We cannot allow Ms. Chloe Robinson to assume fiduciary powers today." He let the words hang there. Safety risk, armed, detained. It was a masterclass in painting a picture with negative space. He did not say I was guilty. He simply implied that where there was smoke, there must be fire, and therefore I should not be trusted with a matchbook, let alone a multi-million-dollar estate. Vanessa sat perfectly still next to him. She had dabbed her eyes again, though I noticed the tissue remained dry. She was projecting the image of a sister who was heartbroken that it had come to this, while secretly delighted that the handcuffs she had ordered had been replaced by a legal shackle. Judge Vance looked at me. His expression was not hostile, but it was wary. Judges are creatures of risk mitigation. If a lawyer says someone is dangerous, the safe play is to pause everything. "Ms. Robinson," the judge said, "counsel makes a serious point. If there is an open police investigation regarding your conduct or the theft of a vehicle, I cannot grant you letters of administration today. I would need to continue this hearing until the matter is resolved." A continuance. That was what she wanted. Delay the appointment. Leave the estate in limbo. Keep control. I stood up. I did not rush. I smoothed the front of my blazer, feeling the hard edge of the incident card in my pocket. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady. "Mr. Sterling is very good at using words like detained and investigation. However, in probate court, we rely on facts, and the facts are these. I was not arrested. I was not charged. The vehicle in question belongs to me, fully and legally, and the report that triggered the stop was not filed by a concerned citizen. It was filed by the woman sitting at that table. I pointed a single finger at Vanessa. She did not flinch, but her jaw tightened. That is speculation, Sterling interrupted smoothly. It is data, I countered, turning my gaze to the judge. The police dispatch log shows the call came in at 6:52 in the morning. I left my driveway at 6:46. The caller identified herself as Vanessa Robinson. She reported her own sister's car stolen 6 minutes after watching me leave for this court hearing. Sterling picked up a piece of paper from his table. I have the case number right here. Your Honor, it shows an active report for a stolen vehicle. The police do not close a theft file in 20 minutes. The status is open. That means the car is legally disputed property. He waved the paper. A printout of the initial report summary. It was a snapshot of the lie before the truth had caught up to it. That is a case number for a report filed, I said. This is the incident card for the resolution. I held up the card Sergeant Miller had given me. It was small, white, and unassuming, but in the context of this hearing, it was a shield. Officer Miller of the Highway Patrol verified my registration, my title, and my insurance at the scene, I continued. He verified the VIN. He released me with no charges and no citations. The only reason the report is still technically open, Your Honor, is because the police are currently reviewing it for evidence of filing a false instrument, Sterling scoffed. A short, dismissive sound. Ms. Robinson is trying to confuse the timeline to hide her own instability. My client acted out of genuine concern when she saw the vehicle missing. Concern? I asked. I looked at Vanessa. Is that what we are calling it? I reached into my binder and pulled out the second piece of evidence, the screenshot. I had printed it on high-gloss photo paper in the Courthouse Business Center 10 minutes before the hearing. The colors were sharp. The timestamps were undeniable. Your Honor, I said, walking toward the bailiff with the document. If this was a genuine concern about a missing vehicle, I would like to know why the petitioner sent me this text message while I was standing on the side of the highway surrounded by police officers. The bailiff took the page and handed it to Judge Vance. The judge adjusted his spectacles. He read the text, then he read the timestamp. If you show up, it will get worse. The judge read aloud. His voice was flat, stripped of the earlier wariness. He looked up over the rim of his glasses at Vanessa. Ms. Vanessa Robinson, the judge said. Vanessa jumped slightly in her seat. Yes, Your Honor? Did you send this message? Vanessa looked at her lawyer. Sterling looked at the paper, then at her. He had not known about the text. I could see the flash of irritation in his eyes. A client who surprises their lawyer is a client who loses. I was emotional, Vanessa stammered. Her voice was higher now, the confident veneer cracking. I meant that the family situation would get worse. I did not want her to come to court and cause a scene. You sent this at 7:30 in the morning, Judge Vance noted. According to the timeline Ms. Chloe Robinson just provided, that was roughly 30 minutes after you reported the car stolen, if you thought the car was stolen. Why were you texting your sister as if she were driving it? The trap snapped shut. If she thought the car was stolen by a stranger, texting me made no sense. If she knew I had the car, then filing the theft report was a crime. I was confused, Vanessa said. I thought maybe she took it, but then I was worried she was having a breakdown. So you reported it stolen with an armed advisory? I cut in. I did not look at her. I addressed the judge. Your Honor, a breakdown does not warrant a felony stop with drawn weapons. That advisory was calculated to ensure I was physically detained, and when that failed, she sent a threat. Sterling stood up, buttoning his jacket. Your Honor, we are getting bogged down in hearsay and text message interpretations. The fact remains that there is a police record. We cannot simply ignore an official police entry based on the word of the respondent. I agree, I said. Sterling looked at me, surprised. We should not rely on my word, I said, and we should not rely on Mr. Sterling's outdated printout. I request that the court clerk call the precinct directly. Right now, we can verify the VIN, the owner status, and the current disposition of the call. The courtroom went silent. This was the nuclear option. Lawyers rarely asked for live verification because the answers were unpredictable, but I knew exactly what was in that log. I had watched Sergeant Miller call it in. "This is highly irregular," Sterling protested. "We have a schedule." "I have time," Judge Vance said. He leaned back in his leather chair. The look on his face had shifted from administrative boredom to sharp interest. He did not like being played, and he was starting to suspect that the woman in the cream coat was playing him. "Clerk," the judge said, "get the number for the dispatch center on the record. Speakerphone." The court clerk, a woman who looked like she had seen everything and was impressed by nothing, picked up the receiver. She dialed the non-emergency number for the highway patrol. The ringing sound was amplified through the courtroom speakers. Burr ring, burr ring. Vanessa was staring at the table. Her hands were gripping the edge so tightly that her knuckles were white. She knew that the police system, which she had treated as a toy, was about to speak back. "Highway Patrol Dispatch. This is Officer Davis," a voice crackled through the room. "Good morning," the judge said. "This is Judge Vance in Probate Courtroom 4B. I am on the record. I need verification on an incident regarding a vehicle reported stolen this morning. License plate number." He looked at me. 7, King, Lincoln, 5, 9, 2. I recited from memory. 7KL, 592, the judge repeated. There was the sound of typing on the other end. Click, clack, click. Every keystroke sounded like a hammer hitting a nail. "Okay, I have the entry," the dispatcher said. "Report filed at 0652 hours, silver sedan." "What is the status of that vehicle?" the judge asked. "Vehicle was located at 0715 hours. The dispatcher read, "Stop was conducted. Driver identified as the registered owner, Chloe Robinson. VIN verified. Ownership verified. No theft occurred." "And the armed advisory?" the judge asked. "Subject was compliant. No weapon found. Vehicle released to owner." Sterling closed his eyes for a brief second. It was the only sign of defeat he allowed himself. "Is there any active warrant or hold on the driver?" the judge pressed. "Negative," the dispatcher said. "Actually, Your Honor, there is a note here from Sergeant Miller. It says, 'False report pending review.' We have flagged the reporting party for potential misuse of the 911 system. Thank you." "Officer," the judge said, "you may disconnect." The line went dead. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute, and suffocating for the petitioner's table. Judge Vance took off his glasses. He picked up the emergency petition that Sterling had filed, the one claiming I was unstable, dangerous, and a thief. He looked at it for a long moment, then looked at Vanessa. "Ms. Robinson," the judge said. His voice was dangerously quiet. "You came into my courtroom and asked me to remove an executor based on a police report that you filed, knowing it was false?" Vanessa opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at Sterling. Sterling, to his credit, knew when to cut a loss. "Your Honor, it appears my client was misinformed about the status of the vehicle. We withdraw the emergency petition." "Withdrawn," the judge said, slamming his hand down on the file. "And let the record show that the court finds no merit in the allegations of theft or instability. Ms. Chloe Robinson is present. She is the legal owner of her property, and she is standing right here." He turned to me. "Ms. Robinson, I apologize for the disruption. We will proceed with the standard probate calendar." "Thank you, Your Honor," I said. I sat down. I did not smile. I did not look at Vanessa with triumph. I opened my binder to the section marked Assets. I picked up my pen. I was ready to work. But as the judge turned his attention to the clerk to call the next item, I felt a gaze burning into the side of my face. I turned my head slightly. Vanessa was sitting straight up. The fear that had been there during the phone call was gone. The embarrassment was gone. In their place was something cold and hard. She was not looking at the judge. She was not looking at her lawyer. She was looking at me. Her eyes drifted down to the thin black folder she still had on the table. She had not opened it yet. The emergency petition had been a bluff, a way to stop me before I started. But the folder? The folder was still there. She saw me looking. A corner of her mouth lifted. Not a smile, but a grimace of resolve. She had lost the opening skirmish. The police gambit had failed. The timeline had choked her, but as she reached out and placed her hand on that black folder, tapping her manicured fingernail against the cover, I realized something terrifying. She had expected the petition might fail. The petition was just noise. The real weapon was inside that folder. Plan B was already in motion. "Your Honor," Sterling said, rising again as if the last 5 minutes had never happened. "While we withdraw the emergency request regarding the arrest, we do have a secondary filing regarding the protection of the estate's beneficiaries." The judge sighed. "Mr. Sterling, you are trying my patience. This is not about the car." "Your Honor," Sterling said, "this is about a protective order." My blood ran cold. A protective order. I watched as Sterling opened the black folder. He pulled out a document that was thicker than the petition. It had a red stamp on the corner. Vanessa looked at me, and for the first time, her eyes signaled a true threat. "You beat the time," her look said. "Now try to beat the fear." "Proceed," Judge Vance said wearily. I gripped my pen. The fight over the car was over. The war for my life was just beginning. The silence in the courtroom was a fragile thing. It hung over us like a sheet of thin glass, temporarily holding back the chaos of the morning. But I knew it would shatter the moment anyone made a sudden move. Judge Vance was rubbing his temples, likely calculating how much of his docket had been consumed by the Robinson family drama. He reached for his gavel, intending to pivot the proceedings back to the admission of the will. But before the wood could strike the block, a sharp electronic chime echoed from the clerk's desk. It was the notification sound of the court's electronic filing system. The clerk, a woman named Mrs. Higgins, who wore her spectacles on a chain and seemed to view every interruption as a personal affront, squinted at her monitor. Her eyebrows shot up toward her hairline. She looked at the judge, then at Vanessa, and finally at me. "Your Honor," Mrs. Higgins said, her voice cutting through the room. "The system has just refreshed. We have a new filing on this matter." Judge Vance frowned. "A new filing? Mr. Sterling, did you submit something else while we were discussing the police report?" Marcus Sterling looked genuinely confused. He glanced at his laptop, then at his client. "No, Your Honor. We withdrew the emergency petition. I have not submitted anything else." "Well, the system disagrees with you," the clerk said dryly. "It is an ex parte request for a temporary protective order. It was uploaded 2 minutes ago." 2 minutes ago. My mind raced. 2 minutes ago. The judge had been grilling the police dispatcher on the speakerphone. 2 minutes ago. The room had been silent except for the crackle of the radio. "Print it," Judge Vance ordered. The laser printer behind the clerk's desk whirred to life. The sound was mechanical and rhythmic, churning out page after page of fresh accusations. I watched the paper stack up in the tray. It looked thicker than the previous petition. Mrs. Higgins walked the stack over to the bench. Judge Vance put his glasses back on. He began to read, and as he did, his face darkened. The exhaustion was replaced by a rigid, controlled anger. "Ms. Robinson," the judge said, not looking up, "and I am speaking to Ms. Vanessa Robinson." Vanessa straightened her spine. She had recovered some of her composure since the police call, but her hands were still trembling slightly in her lap. "Yes, Your Honor." "This document," the judge said, lifting the fresh stack of papers, "alleges that earlier this morning, during the confrontation on the highway, the respondent, your sister, did not just steal the car. It says she, and I am quoting here, brandished a firearm in a threatening manner and told you that you would regret ever challenging the will. It claims you are in imminent fear for your physical safety." I felt the blood drain from my face, not out of fear, but out of shock at the sheer audacity. She was doubling down. The police had just confirmed there was no gun found in the car. The dispatcher had just confirmed the report was being flagged as false, and yet, here she was, putting the same lie into a sworn affidavit, but escalating it to a level that would strip me of my civil rights instantly if believed. I was terrified, Vanessa said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I did not want to say it in front of everyone, but yes, she has a gun. I saw it. You saw it, the judge repeated. Yes, Vanessa said. She waved it out the window. I stood up. I did not ask for permission. The compliance officer in me had vanished, replaced by a woman fighting for her life against a sociopath who knew how to use PDFs as daggers. Your Honor, this is perjury, I said. We just established, on the record, with law enforcement, that there was no weapon. This filing is a direct contradiction of the evidence you heard 60 seconds ago. Counsel, the judge snapped at Sterling. Did you advise your client to file this? Sterling stood up, looking flustered. He was a shark, but even sharks have survival instincts. He knew that signing his name to a document he knew to be false could cost him his license. Your Honor, I did not prepare this document. I was not aware it was being filed. My client has independent access to the e-filing portal. You filed this yourself? The judge looked at Vanessa. Vanessa blinked, her eyes wide and innocent. My assistant must have uploaded it. I sent the draft earlier, before I knew about the police stop details. It must have been a mistake in the timing. She was lying. I knew she was lying. The timing was too precise. The content was too specific to the way the hearing was going. She was trying to salvage the armed narrative because without it, she had no grounds to remove me as executor. A mistake in timing, I said aloud. I looked at the judge. Your Honor, I request that we verify that claim immediately. Verify what? Sterling demanded. My client said it was an administrative error by a subordinate. We can withdraw it? No, I cut him off. You cannot withdraw it. It has been filed. It is part of the record, and it was filed under penalty of perjury. If Vanessa claims her assistant did it from her office, then the metadata will reflect that. But if she filed it right now, sitting in this courtroom, while listening to the police contradict her story, then that is not an error. That is a calculated attempt to defraud the court. Judge Vance looked at me. He nodded slowly. Ms. Chloe Robinson is correct. In the digital age, we do not need to guess about who pressed the button. He turned to the clerk. Mrs. Higgins, pull the transaction receipt for that filing. I want the full cover sheet, the timestamp, and the submission metadata. Specifically, I want the IP address of the uploader. Vanessa's hand twitched toward her purse, which was sitting on the table. It was a small movement, but I saw it. She wanted to hide her phone. The clerk typed furiously. One moment. Your Honor, accessing the back-end log. The room was silent again. But this time, the silence was predatory. We were all watching the clerk's screen. Okay, Mrs. Higgins said. I have the submission log. Filing ID number 9942 Alpha, submitted at 9:15 and 30 seconds. 9:15, the judge noted. That was 3 minutes ago. We were in session. And the source? I asked. Submission IP address is 10.0.1.45. The clerk read. That tracks to a local gateway. Local? The judge asked. Define local. It is the courthouse public Wi-Fi network, Your Honor. The clerk said. Specifically, the guest network access point located in the East Wing, which is where we are currently sitting. A murmur rippled through the few people in the gallery. And the device? The judge pressed. User agent identifies as an Apple iPhone 15 Pro, running iOS 17. The clerk read. I looked at the table. Lying next to Vanessa's elbow was an iPhone 15 Pro. The screen was dark, but the evidence was glowing in the air around it. So, Judge Vance said, leaning over the bench to look directly at Vanessa. Let me understand this timeline. You claim to be terrified of your sister. You claim she brandished a firearm at you this morning. You claim she is a danger to your safety. And yet, you are currently sitting less than 10 feet away from her. And while sitting 10 feet away from this alleged armed maniac, you took out your phone, logged into the court portal, and uploaded a petition claiming you were too afraid to be in her presence? Vanessa opened her mouth. She closed it. She looked at Sterling. But Sterling had physically taken a half step away from her. He was distancing himself from the blast zone. It is not a panic response, I said, my voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. If she were actually afraid, she would be running. She would be calling security. She would not be multitasking on her phone to file paperwork. This is a tactic. She used the court's own Wi-Fi to try and frame me for a crime she knows I did not commit, hoping the paperwork would hit the system before the truth did. I felt unsafe, Vanessa stammered. I wanted it on the record. You wanted a weapon, Judge Vance corrected. You wanted a piece of paper that would force the sheriff to remove Ms. Robinson from the building. You were trying to swat her, Miss Robinson, first on the highway, and now in my courtroom. The judge picked up the fresh filing. He held it like it was contaminated waste. This is what we call a pattern, Judge Vance said. The word hung in the air, heavy and damning. A pattern? Sterling asked weakly. Yes, counsel, a pattern, the judge said. At 6:52, a false report of a stolen car. At 6:55, a false advisory of a firearm. At 7:30, a threatening text message. And now, at 9:15, a fraudulent filing submitted from inside the courtroom alleging the same disproven facts. Your client is not a victim. She is an active aggressor using the judicial system as a tool of harassment. Vanessa sat frozen. Her face was pale, the makeup standing out in stark contrast to her skin. She had played the game of paperwork her entire life. She thought that if she filed enough motions, if she created enough confusion, she would win by attrition. She did not understand that metadata does not lie. She did not understand that an IP address is a witness that cannot be bribed or charmed. Clerk, the judge barked, mark this filing as received but rejected due to bad faith, and print a second copy of that metadata log. I want it attached to the case file. Yes, Your Honor. As for you, Ms. Vanessa Robinson, the judge continued, I am going to refer this specific filing to the district attorney's office for review regarding perjury and filing false instruments. You signed this under penalty of perjury. That means something in this building. Vanessa looked at me then. The mask was completely gone. There was no sadness, no concern, no sisterly affection. There was only raw, naked hatred. She had tried to bury me in paper, and I had just dug myself out and used the dirt to bury her. But as I looked at her, I realized something unsettling. She was cornered. Yes, she was exposed. Yes, but she was not leaving. She was still sitting there. Her hand was resting on her purse, and her eyes were darting around the room, calculating, assessing, looking for the next leverage point. The judge cleared his throat. Now, if there are no further criminal interruptions, can we please proceed to the matter of the estate of Everett Robinson? I believe we were discussing the appointment of the personal representative. Yes, Your Honor, I said. I sat down, my heart rate slowly returning to normal. I had won the battle of the filing. I had proven the pattern. But as I opened my binder back to the will, I caught a glimpse of Vanessa's hand moving under the table. She was texting again. She was not done. The judge had called it a pattern, and patterns, by definition, repeat themselves until something breaks them. I checked my own phone. I had silenced it. But I saw a notification from my bank app flash on the screen, then another, then a security alert from my credit monitoring service. My stomach dropped. The judge thought the pattern was confined to this courtroom. He thought the attack was legal. He did not realize that while Vanessa was losing the ground war in front of the bench, she had already launched the airstrike on my digital life. She had filed the protective order to distract me. The real attack was happening somewhere else, somewhere I could not see until it was too late. Ms. Robinson? The judge asked. Are you ready to proceed? I looked up. forcing a mask of calm onto my face. "I am ready, Your Honor." But under the table, I gripped my phone tight. The war had just moved to a new front. The air in the courtroom had shifted. It was no longer the heavy, static atmosphere of a standard probate hearing. It was charged with the ozone smell of a storm that had just broken. Judge Vance was looking at Vanessa Robinson not as a grieving granddaughter, but as a litigant who had just tried to weaponize his own Wi-Fi network against the integrity of his court. However, a cornered animal does not stop fighting. It simply changes tactics. Marcus Sterling, Vanessa's lawyer, cleared his throat. It was a dry, uncomfortable sound. He knew the protective order gambit had failed. He knew the police report had backfired. But he was being paid to keep the fight alive, and he reached into his briefcase to pull out the next weapon in their arsenal. "Your Honor," Sterling said, his voice lacking the booming confidence it had held 10 minutes ago. Putting aside the procedural confusion regarding the police matters, we must return to the core issue, the fitness of the proposed personal representative. The court must consider the intent of the deceased. We have evidence that suggests Everett Robinson did not wish for Chloe Robinson to manage his affairs. I watched them across the aisle. Vanessa was sitting rigid, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to her lawyer. Sterling walked to the bench. He was holding a piece of paper. It was not a formal legal document. It was not a typed affidavit. It was a single, ragged sheet torn from a yellow legal pad. "We found this in the deceased's study," Sterling said, placing the paper before the judge. "It is a handwritten note, a holographic expression of intent, if you will. It clearly states his hesitation regarding Chloe's involvement." I stood up. "Objection," I said. "I have not seen this document." "Show it to her," Judge Vance ordered. Sounding weary, Sterling walked over to my table. He did not look at me as he slid the paper across the wood. I looked down. The handwriting was shaky, the loops of the letters erratic. It was definitely my grandfather's handwriting, but it was from when? The tremor in the pen stroke suggested it was written during one of his bad days. Perhaps when the Parkinson's was flaring up, or perhaps when he was confused by medication. The note read, "Chloe is too busy. She works too hard. I do not want her to carry this burden. Vanessa should help." That was it. 3 sentences. No context. No date. "This is the evidence?" I asked, looking up at Sterling. "It is a clear statement of preference," Sterling argued, turning back to the judge. "Mr. Robinson felt that Chloe was overwhelmed by her corporate career. He wanted Vanessa to step in. This note proves that the will, which names Chloe, contradicts his final emotional state." I picked up the paper. It felt flimsy in my hand, in my line of work. Documentation is everything. A document without metadata is just a rumor on paper. "Your Honor," I said, my voice calm and analytical, "I would like to direct the court's attention to the 4 corners of this page. Is there a date?" Judge Vance looked at the copy on his bench. "There is no date." "Is there a witness signature?" I asked. "There is no witness signature," the judge confirmed. "Is there any context?" I continued. "This could have been written 5 years ago when I was studying for my compliance certification. It could have been written 2 weeks ago when I was working overtime. It says Vanessa should help. It does not say Vanessa should control the estate. It does not say I revoke my will. It is a fragment of a thought, stripped of time and place. It shows his mind," Vanessa blurted out. She could not help herself. "He told me he was worried about you. He said you were obsessed with work. He wanted me to handle the family side of things." "The family side," I repeated. "Is that why you tried to have me arrested this morning? To help the family?" "Your Honor," Sterling interjected, trying to shield his client. "The note speaks to the deceased's concern. It casts doubt on the appointment." "It casts doubt on nothing," I said, dropping the yellow paper back onto the table. "It is a scrap of paper that appeared exactly when the petitioner needed a lifeline. It has no evidentiary weight against a notarized, Attorney-drafted will that was updated and affirmed 6 months ago. Judge Vance nodded. He looked unimpressed. Mr. Sterling, you know as well as I do that a holographic note without a date or a signature is not a codicil. It is barely hearsay. Unless you have a chain of custody or a witness who saw him write it, this is inadmissible as a binding directive. Vanessa made a sound, a sharp intake of breath. She was losing again. She had thought the emotional weight of a handwritten note would sway the judge. She thought the poor, overworked Chloe narrative would work. But I was not done. Your Honor, I said, the petitioner is trying to paint a picture of my grandfather's intent. She claims he wanted her to take control because he was worried about me. She claims her actions today, the police report, the protective order, are all born out of fear and a desire to protect his legacy. But I have evidence that speaks to her true motive. I reached into my binder. I did not pull out a scrap of yellow paper. I pulled out a transcript, typed, time-stamped, and certified by a third-party transcription service. This, I said, holding up the document, is a transcript of a voicemail I received on my phone 3 days ago. It was left by Vanessa Robinson. Objection? Sterling said instinctively. Relevance? It goes to the petitioner's credibility and motive, I said. She claims she is afraid of me. She claims she wants to honor our grandfather. This voicemail tells a different story. Read it, Judge Vance said. He leaned back, his eyes narrowing. I held the paper up so I could read it clearly. I kept my voice neutral, letting the words do the damage. Transcript of voicemail received Friday at 7:14 in the evening. Caller identified as Vanessa Robinson. Quote, Chloe, pick up the phone. I am done playing nice. You know you cannot handle the portfolio. You do not have the stomach for it. Sign the renunciation form and let me take the lead. If you make me drag this into court, I will bury you in so much paperwork you will lose your job. This is your last chance to do it the easy way. Do not make me do it the hard way. End quote. Silence filled the room. The words hung there, ugly and raw. The hard way, I repeated, lowering the paper. That is what she said. I turned to look at Vanessa. She was staring at me, her mouth slightly open. She had forgotten the voicemail. She leaves so many angry messages, so many threats, that she probably lost track of which ones were actionable. Your Honor, I said, if Vanessa was truly afraid of me, as she claimed in her protective order filing 20 minutes ago, why would she offer me a deal? Why would she tell me to sign the form to do it the easy way? People who are in fear for their lives do not offer business propositions. People who are in fear do not threaten to bury their attacker in paperwork. I walked toward the bench, placing the transcript next to her pathetic yellow note. This is not the language of a victim, I said. This is the language of an extortionist. The easy way was me giving up my inheritance. The hard way was the police stop on the highway. The hard way was the false report of a gun. The hard way was the emergency petition filed from your courtroom Wi-Fi. Sterling looked at the transcript. He knew he could not object to it. It was his client's own voice. She is taking it out of context, Vanessa hissed. I was frustrated. She was ignoring me. I was not ignoring you, I said. I was following the protocol of the will, which is exactly what you are trying to destroy. I turned back to the judge. Your Honor, to clarify the pattern you mentioned earlier, I have prepared a timeline. I believe it is essential for the court to see the sequence of events not as isolated incidents, but as a coordinated attack designed to strip me of my position. I pulled out a single sheet of paper from my binder. It was a simple table, printed in bold, easy-to-read font. I handed a copy to the bailiff for the judge, and I slid a copy across the table to Sterling. At 6:46 in the morning, I began, reciting the data without looking at the paper. I left my residence. At 6:52 in the morning, I continued, Vanessa Robinson called 911 and reported my vehicle stolen. At 6:58 in the morning, I said, my voice hardening. I was pulled over by the highway patrol. Guns were drawn. I was detained on the side of the road. At 7:30 in the morning, I said. Vanessa sent the text message. If you show up, it will get worse. At 7:45 in the morning, I said. Mr. Sterling filed the emergency petition to suspend powers, citing my absence, an absence caused by the police stop Vanessa initiated. And finally, I said, at roughly 8:35 in the morning, Vanessa used her phone, while sitting in this courtroom, to file a request for a protective order, alleging I brandished a gun the police had already verified did not exist. I looked at the judge. This is not grief, Your Honor. This is not concern for a grandfather's wishes. This is a premeditated strategy to eliminate the executor. She tried to frame me for a felony to steal an estate. Vanessa stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. It is not fair, she screamed. The outburst was sudden and shocking. The polished, cream-coated facade shattered completely. He promised me, Vanessa yelled, pointing a trembling finger at the empty judge's bench, then at me. He promised me the house. He promised me the accounts. You were never around. You were always working. You do not need the money. You have your fancy job and your compliance awards. I have nothing. I took care of him. Sit down, Sterling hissed, grabbing her arm. Vanessa, sit down right now. No, she pulled away, her face twisted in ugly, desperate rage. She manipulated him. She came in with her spreadsheets and her binders, and she made him sign that will. It is mine. It is supposed to be mine. I am not going to let her take it just because she is good at filing papers. Ms. Robinson, Judge Vance's voice boomed like thunder. Silence! The command echoed off the mahogany walls. Vanessa froze. She looked around the room, realizing too late that she was not in her living room. She was in a court of law, and she had just admitted that her motivation was not safety, not Grandpa's wishes, but pure, unadulterated entitlement. She sank back into her chair, covering her face with her hands. Judge Vance stared at her for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he turned his gaze to me. Ms. Chloe Robinson, the judge said. Your timeline is noted. The voicemail transcript is admitted into the record. He picked up his pen and began writing furiously on the docket sheet. This court has seen enough, Judge Vance said. I am issuing a sua sponte order regarding the conduct of the parties. He looked at Vanessa, who was now weeping softly. Real tears this time. Tears of a gambler who had bet everything and lost. Effective immediately, the judge ruled. There is to be absolutely no direct contact between the petitioner, Vanessa Robinson, and the personal representative, Chloe Robinson. None. No text messages, no emails, no phone calls, and certainly no approaching each other in the hallways of this courthouse. The judge leaned forward. Ms. Vanessa Robinson, you wanted a protective order? You have one. But it is not to protect you. It is to protect the integrity of this estate from your interference. Any communication regarding the assets, the house, or the probate process must go through Mr. Sterling. If you send one more text message to your sister, I will hold you in contempt of court, and I will sanction your share of the estate. Vanessa looked up, her eyes red. She opened her mouth to argue, but she saw the look on the judge's face and stopped. She looked at her lawyer. Sterling was staring at the table, refusing to meet her gaze. He knew the ship was sinking, and he was already planning how to get to the lifeboats. Do you understand me? The judge asked. Yes, Vanessa whispered. Good, Judge Vance said. Now, we are going to proceed with the appointment of the executor, and if I see one more piece of paper that looks like a delay tactic, I am going to start issuing fines. I stood there, my hand resting on my binder. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't joy. It wasn't even relief. It was the cold satisfaction of a system working exactly as it was designed. Vanessa had tried to use the chaos of the world against me. She had tried to use fear. She had tried to use the police, but in the end, she had been defeated by the very thing she hated most. Documentation. She was trapped. She could not call me to threaten me. She could not text me to harass me. Every word she wanted to say now had to be filtered through a lawyer who billed by the hour. eating away at the very inheritance she was so desperate to claim. She had built a cage of lies, and with one timeline and one transcript. I had locked the door and handed the key to the judge, but as I sat down, I knew it wasn't over. A trapped animal is dangerous, but a trapped animal with nothing left to lose is lethal. She had failed to stop me with the police. She had failed to stop me with the court. That meant her next move would be outside these walls. And it would not be about the estate anymore. It would be about revenge. I opened my laptop. I had access to the estate's bank accounts. I needed to check them. Because if Vanessa couldn't steal the control, she would try to steal the cash. And I was right to worry. The wooden gavel had barely settled into silence when the vibration against my thigh signaled the opening of a new front in this war. I was still standing at the counsel table, organizing my victorious binder. My heart rate slowly decelerating from the sprint of the hearing. When my phone buzzed 3 distinct times, it was not a text message, it was a call pattern I had set up specifically for high-priority financial alerts. I glanced at the screen. The caller ID displayed the fraud prevention unit of the regional bank where my grandfather had kept his primary checking and savings accounts. My stomach tightened, a sensation entirely different from the courtroom anxiety. The courtroom was about permission. The bank was about possession. I grabbed my briefcase. "Excuse me," I murmured to the bailiff, bypassing the usual pleasantries. I stepped briskly out of the heavy double doors and into the corridor, finding a quiet corner near a marble pillar before answering. "This is Chloe Robinson," I said, skipping the hello. "Ms. Robinson, this is David from the fraud prevention team at First Merchant Bank." The voice on the other end was clipped, professional, and urgent. "We have a flag on the account ending in 4490. We received a request 7 minutes ago to change the primary mailing address for all statements and debit cards." I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead against the cool stone of the pillar. 7 minutes ago. That would have been exactly when Vanessa was sitting at the table, weeping fake tears about how much she missed our grandfather, while the judge was reprimanding her. "I did not authorize a change," I said, my voice dropping to a controlled, lethal register. "What is the new address?" "It is a P.O. box in Henderson," David replied. "Box number 412. Henderson was 20 minutes away. It was also where Vanessa's boyfriend lived. "Block it," I ordered. "Do not just decline it. I want a hard freeze on that address. And David, I need to know how the request was made. Was it online?" "No, ma'am," David said. "It was a phone call to our customer service line. The caller identified herself as a family representative assisting the executor. She passed the initial security verification." My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. Security verification meant she had the answers. Mother's maiden name, first pet, high school mascot. She had the challenge questions, I stated, not asking. "Yes," David confirmed. "She provided the correct answers for the backup security questions. That is why the agent initiated the change. The system only flagged it because the new address matches a previous fraud alert linked to a different customer in our database. Vanessa had been sloppy. She had used a P.O. box she had likely used for some other scheme, perhaps one of her boyfriend's failed business ventures. But the terrifying part was not the address. It was the access. Vanessa knew the answers to the security questions because we shared the same history. Our mother's maiden name was her mother's maiden name. My grandfather's first pet was a dog we had both played with as children. She was using our shared childhood as a key to loot the estate. "David, listen to me closely," I said. "I have just walked out of a probate hearing. I have been appointed the personal representative. I am coming to a branch later today with the court orders. Until then, I am verbally instructing you, as the verified account holder on file, to place a total lockdown on all accounts, no withdrawals, no transfers, no address changes, and I want the call recording." "The recording?" "The recording of the person who called you 7 minutes ago," I said. "I want the attempt log. I want the time, the duration, and the audio file preserved. Do not delete it in a routine purge. That recording is evidence of identity theft and wire fraud." I will mark the file for preservation, David said, sounding slightly intimidated by the shift in my tone. I will place a level 3 freeze on the accounts immediately. Thank you. I hung up. I did not put the phone away. I immediately opened my credit monitoring app. If Vanessa was bold enough to call the bank while sitting next to a judge, she was bold enough to try everything else. She'd reported my car stolen to get me arrested. She'd reported me armed to get me shot. She had tried to redirect the bank statements to steal the cash. What was left? My identity. My fingers flew across the screen. I initiated a credit freeze on my grandfather's social security number. Then, I did something most people forget. I placed a freeze on my own. If she decided to open credit cards in my name to ruin my credit score, making me ineligible to be bonded as an executor, she would do it today. I felt a cold, hard rage settling in my chest. This was not a grieving sister acting out of emotion. This was a synchronized attack. She had someone helping her. There was no way she could have navigated the bank's phone tree that quickly while being grilled by a judge unless she had an accomplice. Or unless she was texting the answers to someone else, a distant cousin, a friend, or maybe someone on the inside. Vanessa had friends who worked in call centers. It was not impossible that she had a back door. I put the phone in my pocket and turned back toward the clerk of the court's office. The hallway was filling up with people for the 10 o'clock docket, but I moved through them like a shark through a school of fish. I needed the paper. The judge's order was just words until it was stamped. I stood in line at the clerk's window, my foot tapping a frantic rhythm. When I finally reached the glass, I handed over my request form with a $20 bill. I need certified copies of the letters of administration, I told the clerk, and I need them now, not mailed. I will wait. The clerk looked at the clock. It usually takes 24 hours to process the file. The judge just issued the order from the bench in courtroom 4B, I said, leaning in. There is an active attempt to defraud this estate occurring right now. I need that paper with the raised seal so I can walk into a bank and stop a theft. Please, check the system. The clerk saw the desperation in my eyes, or perhaps the sheer determination. She nodded and disappeared into the back. 10 minutes later, she returned. She slid 3 copies of the document under the glass. The paper was heavy. The seal was embossed, creating a tactile ridge that I ran my thumb over. It felt like armor. Letters of administration. Estate of Everett Robinson. Personal representative. Chloe Robinson. I put the documents in my briefcase and locked it. I turned to leave, my mind already organizing the next hour. Bank of America, Fidelity, the DMV. I had a checklist of systems to close, but I did not make it to the elevator. Chloe, the voice came from behind me. It was soft, wavering, pitched to sound pathetic. I stopped. I did not turn around immediately. I took a deep breath, centering myself. The judge had been very clear, no contact. I turned slowly. Vanessa was standing 10 feet away, near the water fountain. Her lawyer was nowhere in sight. She looked small, her coat pulled tight around her as if she were freezing. Her eyes were red, and her makeup was smeared. Chloe, please, she said, taking a step toward me. We need to talk. Just family. No lawyers. I stared at her. The audacity was breathtaking. 20 minutes ago, she had filed a document claiming I was a violent maniac who waved a gun at her. Now, she wanted to chat? Stay back, I said. My voice was not loud, but it was firm. Don't be like that, Vanessa said. Taking another step, she reached out her hand, as if to touch my arm. I am sorry about the police. I was scared we were going to lose the house. You know how Grandpa was. He promised me that house. I just want to explain. She was closing the distance. 5 feet, 3 feet. She was reaching for me. This was it. The contradiction. I looked past her, scanning the hallway. I saw a sheriff's deputy standing near the security checkpoint, looking bored. Deputy, I called out. My voice rang clear and sharp, cutting through the murmur of the hallway. Vanessa froze. Her hand was suspended in midair, inches from my sleeve. The deputy looked up, his hand dropping instinctively to his belt. He saw me pointing. He saw Vanessa standing too close. He started walking toward us, his boots thudding heavily on the floor. "What is the problem here?" the deputy asked, his eyes darting between us. "Officer," I said, stepping back to create a distinct gap between myself and Vanessa. "I need you to document this interaction. I am Chloe Robinson. This is Vanessa Robinson. We just left courtroom 4B, I pointed at Vanessa, who looked like she had just swallowed a stone. 20 minutes ago, I continued, keeping my eyes fixed on the deputy. This woman filed a sworn petition for a protective order claiming that I am armed, dangerous, and that she is in imminent fear for her life. She told the judge she was terrified to be in the same room as me. The deputy looked at Vanessa. He looked at her proximity to me. He looked at her outstretched hand. And yet, I said, driving the nail into the coffin, she just followed me into the hallway, approached me without her attorney present, and attempted to make physical contact with me. I want it noted in your log that the petitioner voluntarily approached the alleged aggressor. Vanessa's face went pale. The blood drained out of her cheeks so fast she looked like a ghost. She realized it. Finally, you cannot tell a judge you are terrified of someone and then chase them down the hall to beg for money. The two realities cannot coexist. By approaching me, she had just proven that her entire protective order filing, the gun, the threats, the fear, was a complete fabrication. If she were truly afraid, she would be running the other way. "Ma'am," the deputy said to Vanessa, "did you approach this woman?" "We are sisters," Vanessa stammered, pulling her hand back as if my jacket were made of fire. "I just wanted to talk." "You filed a protective order?" the deputy asked, his voice skeptical. "It was denied," Vanessa whispered. "The judge issued a no-contact order from the bench," I corrected. "He explicitly forbade her from approaching me. She is in violation of a court order right now." The deputy stepped between us. He turned his back to me, facing Vanessa. His body language shifted from observer to enforcer. "Ma'am, step back," he ordered. "If a judge told you no contact, that means you do not talk, you do not touch, and you do not follow. Do you understand?" "But Vanessa looked at me over the deputy's shoulder. There was no more sadness in her eyes. There was only the panicked realization that she had walked into a bear trap of her own making. "I am leaving now," I told the deputy. "I am going to my car. I would appreciate it if you kept her here for a moment so I can exit the building safely, since, apparently, safety is such a concern for her." "Go ahead, ma'am," the deputy said to me. "I will hang on to her for a minute." I turned on my heel and walked away. I did not look back. I did not need to. I could hear Vanessa trying to argue with the deputy, her voice rising in that shrill, entitled tone that usually got her what she wanted. But not here, not today. I pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out into the bright, blinding sunlight. The city noise washed over me. Traffic, sirens, the hum of life. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that didn't smell of courthouse wax. I clutched the briefcase to my chest. Inside were the certified letters, the authority. But as I walked toward the parking garage, my mind was not on the victory. It was on the phone call from the bank. Vanessa had tried to intercept the mail. She had tried to redirect the cash flow. And even though I had stopped the address change, the fact remained. She knew the security answers. She knew the mother's maiden name. She knew the name of the first pet. She had the keys to the castle, and she was banging on every door to see which one would open. I reached my car, the same silver sedan that had been the subject of a felony stop 3 hours ago. It looked innocent sitting there in the shade. I unlocked it and threw my briefcase on the passenger seat. I pulled out a notepad from my bag. I uncapped a pen. I did not start the engine yet. I needed to think. Bank accounts, frozen. Credit bureaus, frozen. DMV, title verified. What was left? I looked at the dashboard clock. It was 11 o'clock. The life insurance. My grandfather had a policy, a big one. The beneficiary designation was separate from the will. If Vanessa couldn't break the will, and she couldn't steal the bank accounts, she would go for the policy. And to claim a policy, you didn't need to be the executor. You just needed a death certificate and a claim form, and you needed to be the beneficiary. Or you needed to convince the insurance company that the beneficiary had been changed. I started the car. The engine roared to life. "Not today, Vanessa," I whispered to the empty car. "Not today." I shifted into reverse. The tires squealed slightly on the concrete as I backed out. I wasn't going home. I was going to the local office of massive insurance conglomerate that held the policy. I drove out of the garage, checking my rearview mirror. No police cars this time, no flashing lights, just the open road and a race against a sister who was burning down our family history to keep herself warm. The fluorescent lights of the police precinct were a different kind of harsh than the courthouse. If the courthouse was about judgment, the precinct was about processing. It smelled of floor cleaner and stale coffee. I stood at the records division window, a thick glass partition separating me from a clerk who looked like she had been stamping forms since the Reagan administration. "I need the full CAD log for incident number 202491110, I said, sliding my driver's license under the glass. "And I need the body camera tag numbers for the responding officers, specifically Sergeant Miller and Officer Hayes." The clerk adjusted her glasses. "You can get the summary online for $10, she said, not looking up from her screen. "I do not want the summary," I said, my voice flat and precise. "The summary scrubs the dispatch notes. I need the raw log. Specifically, I need the section where the caller advised dispatch that the subject was armed and dangerous." The clerk paused. She looked up. "That is internal data. That is the evidence of a felony false report," I corrected. "I am the subject of that stop. I am the registered owner of the vehicle. Under the Freedom of Information Act and state discovery laws regarding my own detainment, I am entitled to see the cause for the high-risk stop. I want the printout that shows the armed qualifier. I want to see the exact time it was entered and the exact code used." I needed that specific line of text. If Vanessa had just reported the car stolen, she could plead ignorance or confusion. She could say she thought I took it without asking. But the moment she added "armed," she crossed the line from a civil dispute to a malicious attempt to get me killed. I needed that malice printed on government letterhead. The clerk sighed, realizing I was not going to leave. She typed in the incident number. "It will be 25 cents per page." "Print it all," I said, "and certify it." 10 minutes later, I walked out of the precinct with a manila envelope. Inside was the timeline of my almost death. I could see the entries. Caller advises subject has firearm. Caller advises subject is erratic. Request backup. It was a script written by my sister, acted out by unwitting officers. I sat in my car and took a picture of the document. Then, I drove to the office of Elias Thorne. I had found Elias 3 years ago when I needed a consultation for a compliance issue at work. He was not a courtroom shouter like Marcus Sterling. Elias was a probate specialist who operated like a forensic accountant. He did not care about emotional pleas. He cared about paper trails. "Chloe," Elias said, ushering me into his office. It was quiet, lined with books, and smelled of leather. "You look like you have been through a war." "Just the opening battle," I said. I laid the certified CAD log, the incident card, and the 3 certified letters of administration on his desk. "I want to hire you, but I do not want you to argue with Vanessa. I do not want you to negotiate with Sterling." "Then what am I doing?" Elias asked, putting on his reading glasses to scan the CAD log. His eyebrows went up when he saw the armed advisory. "I want you to build the record," I said. "I want you to draft a letter to Sterling. I want it to be the most boring, dry, and terrifyingly specific letter he has ever received. I want you to list every single false statement Vanessa made today. I want you to attach this police log. I want you to attach the judge's no-contact order. And I want you to state that any further interference with the estate administration will be met with an immediate motion for sanctions and a referral to the district attorney." Elias nodded slowly. "You are building a perimeter." "I am building a cage," I said. Vanessa thrives on chaos. She thinks if she throws enough mud, some of it will stick, or at least it will make the water so muddy that I will quit. I need to make the water crystal clear. Every time she lies, I want a piece of paper that proves it. We can do that, Elias said. I will have the letter out by close of business. We will demand a full retraction of the allegations and a signed non-interference agreement. She won't sign it, of course. I know she won't, I replied. But her refusal to sign will be Exhibit B at the next hearing. I left Elias's office feeling lighter. I had delegated the legal wrestling. Now, I had to deal with the social fallout. My phone had been buzzing intermittently for the last hour. I had ignored it to focus on the police and the lawyer. But now, sitting in the quiet of my car, I checked the notifications. It was starting. There was a text from Aunt Sarah. Chloe, I just got off the phone with Vanessa. She is hysterical. She says the police had you at gunpoint? What on earth are you doing? Grandpa's reputation cannot handle a drug scandal. There was a message from my cousin Mike. Heard you got arrested. Do you need bail money or a lawyer? And another from a number I did not save. Likely one of Vanessa's friends. You should be ashamed of yourself, terrorizing your sister like that. Vanessa was working the phones. She knew she had lost in court, so she was taking the case to the court of public opinion. She was twisting the narrative, in her version. The police stop happened because I was the problem. She was leaving out the part where she was the one who called them. She was painting an image of me as unstable, criminal, and dangerous. The exact same picture she tried to sell the judge. The old Chloe, the sister who just wanted peace, would have called Aunt Sarah and cried. I would have tried to explain. I would have begged them to believe me. But the Chloe who had stared down a rifle barrel this morning did not have the energy for begging. I opened the file on my phone, the high-resolution scan of the cleared/false report document from the police. Combined with the judge's order appointing me executor, I drafted a single, standard reply. Please find attached the official police documentation regarding the incident this morning. The report was flagged as false by the department. No charges were filed. The vehicle is legally mine. Also attached are the letters of administration issued by Judge Vance an hour ago, confirming my standing as the personal representative. Any further questions regarding the estate should be directed to the probate attorney. Elias Thorne. I copied the text. I pasted it to Aunt Sarah. Send. I pasted it to Cousin Mike. Send. I pasted it to the unknown number. Send. I did not add, love Chloe. I did not add, I hope you are well. I stripped the emotion out of it completely. The response from Aunt Sarah came back 30 seconds later. Oh, I see. Vanessa said, well, never mind. Glad you are okay. The gossip died instantly. Rumors thrive on ambiguity. They suffocate under the weight of a PDF with a government seal. Vanessa could scream gun all she wanted, but she could not argue with a document that said, verification negative. I put the phone away. The family was handled. Now for the money. I spent the next 3 hours driving to every financial institution where my grandfather held assets. The bank where Vanessa had tried to change the address was first. I walked in, not as a customer, but as the law. I sat down with the branch manager. I placed the certified letters of administration on the desk. I placed my driver's license next to it, and then I placed the CAD log of the police call. I want to be very clear, I told the manager. There is a family member who is actively attempting to access these funds through social engineering. She has the answers to the security questions because she grew up in the same house. She knows the name of the dog. She knows the high school. The manager looked at the police log, his eyes widening. I am placing a requirement on this account, I continued. No changes, no withdrawals, no transfers, unless they are made in person, by me, with 2 forms of photo identification. If someone calls, even if they have the password, even if they know the mother's maiden name, you are to log the call and deny the request. I want a verbal password added to the account that only I know. We can do that, the manager said. We will add a high-risk flag. Every transaction will require a supervisor's override. Good, I said. Because if $1 leaves this account without my signature, the bank will be liable for negligence. I am building a paper trail, and I would hate for your branch to be part of the problem. I did the same thing at the brokerage firm. I did the same thing at the life insurance office. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I had wrapped the estate in a layer of bureaucratic armor so thick that Vanessa would need a blowtorch to get through it. I was exhausted. My head was pounding, and the adrenaline crash was starting to set in. I drove home, the events of the day playing on a loop in my mind. The lights, the gun, the courtroom, the lies. When I walked into my apartment, I saw a large envelope taped to my door. It was a courier packet. I ripped it open. It was a notice from the court. Judge Vance had not wasted time. He had set a review hearing for 7 days from now. The notice was standard, but at the bottom, there was a handwritten note from the judge himself, photocopied onto the service papers. Parties are advised that any future filings must be accompanied by independent evidentiary support. Frivolous motions or filings made in bad faith will be subject to sanctions under Section 57 of the Probate Code. I smiled. It was a warning shot. Vanessa would be holding this same paper right now. She would be reading those words. Sanctions. Bad faith. For the first time in her life, Vanessa was not fighting a person. She was fighting a system. She could manipulate people. She could cry to Aunt Sarah. She could charm a grandfather with dementia, but she could not charm a docket number. She could not gaslight a timestamp. She was beginning to realize that every time she moved, she left a footprint, and I was right behind her, pouring plaster into the mold, letting it harden, and labeling it Exhibit C. My phone buzzed one last time. It was an email from Elias Thorne. Subject: Confirmation of delivery, Chloe. The demand letter has been delivered to Mr. Sterling's office via courier. I also took the liberty of copying the court clerk on the correspondence, so it is part of the official file. Sterling called me 10 minutes ago. He sounded tired. He asked if we would be willing to discuss a partial settlement. I told him we would discuss nothing until the false police report is formally retracted. Rest easy tonight. The record is built. I put the phone down on my kitchen counter. I looked at the empty apartment. It was quiet, peaceful. I knew Vanessa was not sleeping. She was probably pacing her floor, looking at the growing pile of documents, the police logs, the court orders, the lawyers' letters. She was realizing that the sheer volume of paper was becoming a wall she could not climb. She wasn't afraid of me. She never had been. She thought I was weak because I followed the rules. But now, she was starting to be afraid of the rules. She was starting to be afraid of the dossier. I went to my refrigerator and poured a glass of cold water. I drank it standing up, looking out the window at the city skyline. "Your move, Vanessa," I whispered. "But remember, I am keeping score," and I knew, with a certainty that chilled my bones, that her next move would not be legal. She had run out of courts. She had run out of banks. She had run out of lies she could tell on paper. When the system blocks a predator, the predator does not stop hunting. It just stops following the law entirely. I went to my front door and checked the deadbolt. Then I checked it again. The paper war was winning, but the real danger was just beginning to stir in the dark. The internet does not care about the truth. It cares about the thumbnail. I learned this hard lesson at 7 o'clock that evening, sitting in my living room with a glass of lukewarm water and a laptop that felt like a radioactive isotope. The video had been posted by a local citizen journalist account, the kind that chases police scanners and monetizes tragedy. The title was written in screaming block letters: "Armed suspect stopped on Highway 101. I clicked play. The footage was shaky, filmed from a passing car. It showed a silver sedan, my sedan. It showed a woman in a navy blue suit, me, walking backward with her hands in the air. It showed the sunlight glinting off the barrel of a police rifle aimed at my chest. To a stranger scrolling through their feed during a lunch break, the narrative was obvious. I looked like a criminal. I looked like a white-collar embezzler caught making a run for the border, or a drug trafficker trying to blend in. The comments section was a sewer of speculation. "She looks guilty. Nice suit. Probably paid for it with stolen money. Lock her up before she hurts someone. I closed the laptop, my heart hammering a sick rhythm against my ribs. I had beaten the police. I had beaten the protective order. But Vanessa had managed to do something the law could not. She had stained my image, and in my world, the world of corporate compliance and regulatory oversight, reputation was not just vanity, it was currency. My phone buzzed. It was not a text from family, it was an email notification. The sender was the Director of Human Resources at Crown Vanta Compliance Group. The subject line was 3 words that make every corporate employee's blood run cold. Urgent. Meeting request. I looked at the time. It was sent at 8:15 in the evening. Corporate HR directors do not send emails at night unless the building is on fire or a liability has been identified. I was the liability. The next morning, I did not drive the silver sedan. I took a rideshare. I did not want anyone in the parking garage to recognize the car from the video. I walked into the Crown Vanta Glass and Steel headquarters wearing my sharpest charcoal suit, carrying the same briefcase that had shielded me in court. Karen Reynolds, the HR director, was waiting for me. Her office was a soundproof fishbowl overlooking the city. She did not offer me coffee. She sat behind her desk, her tablet open, displaying the paused video of my roadside detainment. "Chloe," Karen said. Her voice was not unkind, but it was professional, detached, and terrifying. "We need to talk about this. Our legal department flagged it this morning. We have clients calling. They want to know why one of our senior compliance officers was held at gunpoint on a major interstate." I sat down. I did not apologize. I did not cry. Apologies are admissions of guilt, and tears are admissions of weakness. "It looks bad, Karen," I said, my voice steady. "I agree. The optics are terrible." "It is not just optics, Chloe," she said. "We handle sensitive data for Fortune 500 companies. We certify their ethics. We cannot have an employee who is involved in armed criminal activity." "I was not involved in criminal activity," I said. "I was the victim of a crime." I placed my briefcase on her desk and opened it. I did not take out a resume. I took out the dossier. I laid out the certified KD log from the police. I laid out the letters of administration with the raised seal. I laid out the judge's no-contact order. "Please look at the police log," I said, sliding the paper over the glass surface of her desk. "Look at the entry time. Look at the clearance code." Karen picked up the paper. She adjusted her reading glasses. "Caller advises subject is armed," she read aloud. Then her eyes moved down. "Subject cleared. No weapon found. False report pending review." "My sister is contesting our grandfather's estate," I explained, keeping the emotion out of my voice. "She attempted to prevent me from attending the probate hearing by swatting me. She used the police as a weapon to damage my credibility. And now, the video of that attack is being used to damage my career." Karen looked up. The corporate mask slipped, replaced by a look of genuine shock. "Your sister called this in?" "Yes," I said. "And if Crown Vanta penalizes me for this, you are effectively completing the attack she started. You would be validating a felony false report." I leaned forward. This was the gamble. I had to speak their language. "Karen, I am a compliance officer. My job is to identify when a system is being manipulated to commit fraud. That is exactly what is happening here. The police system was manipulated. The court system was manipulated. And now, she is trying to manipulate our corporate HR system to cut off my income stream. If I lose my job, I lose the ability to fund the legal defense of the estate. That is her goal." Karen looked at the documents again. She looked at the judge's order threatening sanctions for bad faith. She was a smart woman. She recognized a paper trail when she saw one. "This is extreme," Karen murmured. "It is extortion," I corrected. "And I am handling it with the full authority of the probate court. But I need the company to stand by the facts, not the Facebook comments." Karen closed the tablet. Turning the video off, the silence in the room stretched for 10 seconds. Then, she nodded. "Okay," she said. "I will talk to legal." We will issue an internal memo stating that the matter has been reviewed and you have been fully cleared of any wrongdoing. If clients ask, we will tell them it was a case of identity victimization. Thank you, I said. However, Karen added, her eyes narrowing slightly, you need to end this. We can support you for a news cycle, Chloe, but we cannot have a compliance officer starring in a weekly police drama. Fix it. I am fixing it, I said, standing up. I am building the record. I left the office with my job intact, but the warning was clear. I was on borrowed time. Vanessa's chaos was leaking into every compartment of my life. I spent the rest of the day in my office, working with a mechanical focus. I audited spreadsheets. I reviewed regulatory filings. I did everything I could to prove that I was the stable, boring, reliable professional I claimed to be. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, an email landed in my personal inbox. The sender was Jay Miller, a name I recognized as a college friend of Vanessa's, someone who had always been a little too eager to do her bidding. The subject line was blank. I opened it. Chloe, I'm just passing this along because I want peace for the family. Vanessa is really upset. She says this whole court thing is tearing everyone apart. She said she is willing to drop the contest and the other stuff if you just agree to a 50-50 split of the liquid assets. She does not want the house anymore, just the cash. She thinks it is fair. If you agree, she will stop the bad press and tell everyone it was a misunderstanding. Think about it. Is it worth ruining your reputation over? I stared at the screen. There it was, the pivot. For 24 hours. Vanessa had screamed that she was afraid of me. She had sworn to a judge that I was a danger to her life. She had claimed she needed a protective order to sleep at night. And now? Just give me the cash and I will stop. Fear does not negotiate a 50-50 split. Terror does not offer to make the bad press go away. This was blackmail. Plain and simple. She was holding my reputation hostage. The video, the police report, the rumors, they were all leveraged to force a settlement. She did not want the estate. She did not care about Grandpa's legacy. She just wanted a payout. I did not reply. A reply would be a negotiation. And I do not negotiate with terrorists, domestic or familial. Instead, I clicked print. I printed the email. I printed the metadata showing the sender's connection to Vanessa. I printed the timestamp. Then I opened my case binder. I added this email to the section marked Exhibit D, Bad Faith Negotiations. I realized then that Vanessa had made a fatal miscalculation. She thought she was offering me a way out. In reality, she was handing me the final nail for her coffin by offering to stop the bad press in exchange for money. She was admitting that she controlled the press. She was admitting that the damage to my reputation was a calculated lever, not an accidental side effect. She was not a victim. She was a racketeer. I called Elias Thorne, my lawyer. Elias, I said when he picked up, I just got a settlement offer via a proxy. She wants 50% of the cash in exchange for stopping the smear campaign. Do not respond, Elias said immediately. I know, I said. I am just adding it to the pile. I am preparing for the sanctions hearing. I want everything in one document, the police log, the voicemail, the false protective order, and now this email. We have enough to bury her. Chloe, Elias said, the judge is already angry. This will push him over the edge. I want to be sure, I said. I am going to the house tonight. I need to go through Grandpa's desk one more time. I want to make sure there are no other surprises, no hidden accounts, no real handwritten notes that she could twist. Be careful, Elias warned. Do not engage with her. I have a police escort on speed dial, I assured him. I drove to my grandfather's house as the sun was setting. The house was a large, Victorian estate that smelled of cedar and old books. It was empty now, silent in a way that felt heavy. Vanessa had wanted this house, then decided she only wanted the cash. It was just an asset to her. To me, it was a memory. I walked into the study. The desk was covered in dust. I had already inventoried the main files, but tonight I was looking for the deep storage, the things he kept hidden. I opened the bottom drawer of the heavy oak desk. It was filled with old tax returns from the 1990s. I sifted through them, checking for anything relevant. Nothing. I pulled the drawer all the way out. Setting it on the floor, I shone my flashlight into the empty cavity of the desk. There, taped to the underside of the drawer above, was a thick manila envelope. My heart skipped a beat. It was the classic hiding spot of a man who grew up in the Depression era, a man who didn't trust banks or lawyers completely. I reached in and peeled the tape away. The envelope fell into my hand. It was heavy. I turned it over. On the front, written in my grandfather's distinct, shaky block letters, were 7 words that made the hair on my arms stand up. Open if anyone tries to delay court. I stared at the writing. He knew. Somehow, in the fog of his final years, he had seen this coming. He had known Vanessa's nature. He had known that she would not accept the will. He had known that there would be a fight. I sat down in his leather chair, the envelope resting on my lap. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of the moment. This was not a legal document drafted by a firm. This was a message from the grave. I reached for the letter opener. Vanessa thought she was fighting a sister who was worried about her job. She thought she was fighting a lawyer who billed by the hour. She did not realize she was about to fight the ghost of the man she was trying to rob. I slid the blade under the flap of the envelope. The paper sliced open with a sharp, tearing sound. I reached inside and pulled out the contents. It was not a will. It was not a check. It was a single, bound document with a blue cover and a digital flash drive taped to the front. I read the title on the document, and my breath hitched in my throat. It was not what I expected. It was something far worse for Vanessa. It was the one thing that would make the false police report look like a misdemeanor parking ticket. It was the reason he had chosen me, and it was the reason she had been so desperate to stop me from getting these powers. I looked at the flash drive. I looked at the document. I took my phone out and took a picture of the envelope with the warning, "Open if anyone tries to delay court." "You wanted a delay, Vanessa," I whispered to the empty room. "You got one, but you are not going to like what I found in the waiting room." I put the documents into my briefcase, locking the clasps with a loud click. The sanctions hearing was in 2 days. I had planned to walk in with a shield, a defense of my character and a rebuttal of her lies. Now I was walking in with a sword. The courtroom for the sanctions hearing felt different than it had 2 days ago. The air was no longer thick with the humidity of emotional outbursts or the static of uncertainty. It was cold, sterile, and smelled of antiseptic floor cleaner. It was the smell of an operating room where a tumor was about to be excised. Judge Vance sat on the bench, his posture rigid. He did not look like a mediator today. He looked like an executioner. On his desk sat a neat stack of documents: the police CAD log, the affidavit from the bank manager regarding the attempted address change, the metadata from the courthouse Wi-Fi, and the email Vanessa had sent offering to sell her silence for 50% of the cash. I sat at the petitioner's table next to Elias Thorne. We did not speak. We did not need to. My binder was open. My hands were folded. On the other side of the aisle, Vanessa sat alone. Marcus Sterling, her high-priced lawyer, was notably absent. A junior associate from his firm sat next to her, looking like he had drawn the short straw and was regretting every life choice that had led him to law school. Vanessa looked pale. The confident, cream-coated socialite from Tuesday was gone. In her place was a woman who looked like she had not slept in 48 hours, wearing a gray sweater that swallowed her frame. She kept glancing at the door, as if hoping for a rescue that was never coming. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Vance did not waste time with pleasantries. He adjusted his glasses and looked down at the docket. "We are here for a review of the conduct of the parties in the matter of the estate of Everett Robinson," the judge said. His voice was a low rumble. "Specifically, we are here to determine if the actions of the petitioner, Vanessa Robinson, constitute a bad faith attempt to defraud the court and interfere with the administration of the estate." The junior associate stood up, his voice cracking slightly. "Your Honor, We would like to request a continuance. Mr. Sterling is unavailable today due to— Denied. Judge Vance cut him off. Mr. Sterling knew about this hearing. If he chose not to be here, that is a reflection of his judgment, or perhaps his desire to distance himself from what is about to happen. Sit down, counsel. The associate sat down immediately. Vanessa flinched. Ms. Chloe Robinson, the judge said, turning to me, you submitted a supplemental evidence packet yesterday. It contained a sealed envelope found in the deceased's personal effects. Is that correct? I stood up. Yes, Your Honor. I have reviewed the contents, Judge Vance said. He picked up the blue-bound document I had found in the desk, the one with the flash drive taped to it. And I find it to be illuminating. He turned his gaze to Vanessa. Ms. Robinson, your sister has provided the court with a letter written by your grandfather, Everett Robinson, dated 3 months prior to his death. It was sealed with an instruction to be opened only in the event of a court delay. Vanessa looked confused. She had not known about the letter. She shook her head slightly. I do not know what you are talking about. Allow me to read it into the record, the judge said. He opened the file. The rustle of the paper was the only sound in the room. To the court, the judge read, if you are reading this, it means my granddaughter Vanessa has challenged my will. I love her, but I know her. She believes she is entitled to my estate because she spent time in my house. But I also know that she is capable of great manipulation. If Chloe is the executor, Vanessa will try to destroy her. She will not fight on the facts. She will create chaos. She will call the authorities. She will manufacture crises at the last minute. She will try to ruin Chloe's reputation to force a settlement. I am writing this to tell you, do not believe the tears. Believe the ledger. The judge lowered the paper. Believe the ledger, the judge repeated. A prophetic warning. Vanessa was staring at the judge, her mouth slightly open. He did not write that. He was sick. Chloe made him write it. The document was notarized by a mobile notary service, the judge said calmly. We verified the stamp this morning. He was of sound mind, and more importantly, Ms. Robinson. His prediction has been matched with uncanny precision by your actions over the last 72 hours. The judge picked up the timeline I had created, the one Elias had formatted into a stark, unforgiving table. He predicted you would create chaos, the judge said. At 6:52 in the morning on Tuesday, you reported a vehicle stolen that you knew was not stolen. He predicted you would call the authorities, the judge continued. You added an armed advisory to that report, resulting in a felony stop of the executor. He predicted you would manufacture crises, the judge went on, his voice rising slightly. You filed an emergency protective order from the courthouse Wi-Fi, claiming fear for your life while sitting 10 feet away from the person you accused. And finally, the judge said, picking up the email printout, he predicted you would try to force a settlement. This email, sent by your associate, offers to stop the bad press in exchange for 50% of the liquid assets. That is not a legal negotiation. That is extortion. Vanessa stood up. Her hands were shaking violently. I was scared. I just wanted what was fair. I took care of him. She was never there. She was always at work. You were scared? The judge asked. Scared enough to lie to the police? Scared enough to try to change the bank address to a PEO box in Henderson? Scared enough to threaten your sister's job? I deserve it, Vanessa screamed. The facade finally broke completely. It is my money. She does not need it. She has a career. I have nothing. And whose fault is that? Judge Vance asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and brutal. Vanessa froze. You have nothing, the judge said, because you have spent your life trying to shortcut the system rather than contributing to it. And today, you tried to shortcut my courtroom. Judge Vance looked down at his notes. He picked up his pen. The court finds that the filing of the request for protective order was made in bad faith and contained materially false statements made under penalty of perjury. I am referring that filing to the district attorney's office for review. You may very well be facing charges for filing a false instrument." Vanessa gasped. The junior associate looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I am forwarding the full unredacted CAD log of the police incident to the state prosecutor. Filing a false police report with an armed advisory is a felony in this state. That is out of my hands now. You will have to answer to a criminal court for what you did on that highway." Vanessa sank back into her chair. She looked small, defeated, but the judge was not done. "However," Judge Vance said, "those are criminal matters. I am a probate judge. My job is to execute the will of Everett Robinson, and thanks to the document your sister found, I now have a very specific instruction on how to handle this exact situation." He turned a page in the blue-bound document. "Your grandfather anticipated this," the judge said, "and he included a specific forfeiture clause. It is what we call a no contest and interference clause. Usually, these clauses just say that if you challenge the will, you lose your share. But Mr. Robinson was a meticulous man. He added a subsection. The judge adjusted his glasses and began to read the legal text. If any beneficiary attempts to delay the probate process by filing false reports with law enforcement, initiating fraudulent civil filings, or attempting to access estate assets without authorization, such actions shall be considered a direct contest of this will. In such an event, the share of that beneficiary shall be revoked in its entirety." The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the hard drive in the court reporter's machine. "Did you hear that, Ms. Robinson?" the judge asked. "Revoked in its entirety." Vanessa looked up. Her eyes were wide, filled with a dawn of horrific realization. "No," she whispered. "You cannot. That is millions of dollars." "I can," the judge said. "And I am, but your grandfather was a merciful man." He added one final sentence. The judge read the last line. "In the event of such forfeiture, the beneficiary Vanessa Robinson shall receive the sum of $1. This amount is bequeathed so that she cannot claim she was forgotten." $1. It was not about the money. It was the ultimate final word. It was a message from a man who had loved her enough to leave her a fortune, but known her well enough to install a kill switch. He had given her a choice: take the inheritance and behave, or try to steal it and lose everything. She had chosen to steal. "The clerk will record the order," Judge Vance said, his voice finalizing the destruction of Vanessa's future. "The share of Vanessa Robinson is reduced to $1. The remainder of the estate is to be distributed to the residual beneficiary, Chloe Robinson." Vanessa did not scream this time. She did not cry. She simply sat there, staring at the table, her mouth slightly open. It was the look of someone who had walked into a casino, bet their life on red, and watched the ball land on black. She had not just lost the money. She had lost the war. She had lost her leverage. She had lost her freedom, potentially, pending the criminal investigation. "Ms. Chloe Robinson," the judge said. "Yes, Your Honor. I am issuing the full permanent letters of administration to you effective immediately. I am also making the no-contact order permanent for a period of 5 years. If she contacts you, if she emails you, if she sends a third party to approach you, you are to call the police immediately, and this time they will not be arresting you. Thank you, Your Honor." "Court is adjourned," Judge Vance said. He slammed the gavel down. The sound was sharp, final, and satisfying. The judge swept out of the room. The bailiff moved toward Vanessa's table. Not to arrest her yet, but to ensure she left the building without incident. I packed up my binder. I placed the judge's order inside, right on top of the police log. I closed the latch. Click. I turned to leave. As I passed Vanessa's table, she looked up. Her eyes were hollow. She looked like she wanted to say something, perhaps a threat, perhaps a plea. But she saw the binder in my hand. She saw the documentation. She saw the evidence that had just cost her a life of luxury. She closed her mouth and looked away. I walked down the center aisle. My heels clicked on the floor, the same rhythm as the day I walked in, but lighter now. I pushed through the double doors and into the hallway. Elias was waiting for me. He smiled, a rare, genuine smile. $1, Elias said. I have been practicing law for 30 years. I have never seen a clause that specific actually trigger. He knew, I said softly. He knew exactly who she was. What do you want to do now? Elias asked. We need to file the deed transfer for the house. We need to consolidate the accounts. Not today, I said. Today, I am going to go to work. I have a compliance report to finish. Elias laughed. You are relentless. Chloe. I am safe, I corrected. I walked out of the courthouse and into the bright midday sun. The air tasted sweet. The city noise was a symphony of freedom. I walked to my car, the silver sedan. It was parked in the same spot. I got in and sat in the driver's seat. I looked at the passenger seat where my briefcase lay. Inside was the story of the last 3 days. The fear, the adrenaline, the guns, the lies. Most people think that revenge is about screaming. They think it is about making a scene, throwing a drink, or slapping someone across the face. They think it is about emotion. But as I started the engine, watching the dashboard light up with a steady, reassuring glow, I knew the truth. Real revenge is quiet. Real revenge is precise. Real revenge is letting your enemy sprint toward the cliff edge while you stand still and check the map. Vanessa had tried to turn me into a victim. She had tried to label me a risk. She had tried to erase me. But she forgot the one rule that governs my life. The rule that governs the banks, the courts, and the world. If it is not written down, it did not happen. And if it is written down, it is forever. I pulled out of the garage, merging into traffic. I was not the sister who got arrested. I was not the sister who got disinherited. I was the sister who kept the receipts, and for the first time in a long time, the road ahead was perfectly, beautifully clear. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Chloe's revenge. Did Vanessa get what she deserved? If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button so more people can hear this story.